Ranjini will be talking about a female Buddha, a Roman emperor, lessons for joyful living. Welcome, Ranjini.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you, Brittany. Wonderful to be here. So I'm going to be talking about a female Buddha and a Roman emperor. So we are in really good company. We are going to begin with a brief meditation session, a brief mindfulness session. In Buddhism, it's traditional to begin every session with intention setting. So I thought that would be great. We do that in journaling too. So just let's begin. It's a quick 1 minute coming into your body. So just come home to your body. And feel your feet on the floor. Your palms can rest on your thighs. Just take a few long, deep breaths. Our human life is extraordinarily precious. And we know that so well in Stoicism, where we begin every morning recognizing what our core values are. And at the end of the day, looking at what we did, whether we did it well, what we left out, what we could have done better. And human effort is extraordinarily useful. Because Marcus Aurelius, in the midst of all his responsibilities, sat with his journal. 1,900 years later, we have his distillation of Stoic wisdom. We have the fruits of his hard work and efforts. So the intention as we begin this conference, this historic conference, that perhaps Marcus and Cleanthes and Zeno imagined would happen one day in the future. Just recognizing our effort in being here, in a gathering where our focus is to develop character and excellence and courage and compassion, where our desire is to be of benefit. It takes courage, it takes vision, and it takes hard work. So applaud yourself for being here today, for your effort and your motivation. And may whatever we do here today be of benefit to all, to ourselves and to others. In Buddhism, every practice session, as it does in Stoicism in a different way, begins with this heartfelt aspiration of bodhicitta, that recognizing our own precious human life, we develop the intention to use our life usefully for all sentient beings, even for the animals of the earth, the insects, the birds. We generate the heartfelt intention to make good use of our precious human life. So Stoicism perhaps began with Socrates and Pythagoras studying from the Pythias. I was reading one of Donald's tweets yesterday in Delphi. It perhaps began with the manifestation of these women And though you often see in Buddhism, you see Siddhartha, you see the historical Buddha in a male form. In Buddhism, the mother of all Buddhas is Prajnaparamita, Tara, the female form. In Buddhism, the feminine principle is associated with Sophia, wisdom. And the masculine principle is associated with compassion. And we all have both principles within us. I think one of the reasons that so many of us resonate with Marcus Aurelius so much is because within him, we have that balance of the male and female principles. Marcus, one of the most powerful men in his time, leading all these people to 12 legions, to war, civil war, the Marcomannic Wars. He's also vulnerable and human. And some called him scornfully a dove, unlike Avidius Cassius, who was called a hawk. Marcus had the courage to not fit into this masculine stereotypes of his day, but to actually be that dove. And to know that being that dove does not make you weak. That within us, we must have that balance. And that same thing goes for the female Buddha. She can be fierce and she can be gentle. But even when she is fierce, and she is fierce only when skillful means don't work, when gentle persuasion doesn't work, she acts with the heart of compassion. So I'm going to go bring up my PowerPoint. And here we see, okay. Not sure why it's not going into slide sharing. There we are. Sorry. Well, right at the beginning, we have Marcus Aurelius and we have Tara. And Tara, as you can see, she's beautiful. She has 7 eyes on the palms of her hand and on her feet. And part of that is because this is a symbol of her all-seeing compassion. So I want to talk about today how I came into Stoicism, and I want to tell you the story of Tara, her 21 faces. I want to touch on the faces of Marcus Aurelius, and then a little bit on the wish-fulfilling jewel, which is the mind in Buddhism. So I came into Stoicism through a bust. I got this gift of a bust in Dubai, and I didn't know who the name was. And then I figured out one day, many years later, on a visit to the ancient Agora, that the bust was the bust of Antoninus Pius, the adoptive father of Marcus Aurelius. And then when I read Donald's book many years later, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, I was struck by the fact at how much in Stoicism was what I had studied in Buddhism. I had been a student, I am a student of Buddhism and also a Buddhist teacher. And I was struck by the similarities between both traditions. So the story of Tara Tara is seen as a historical person. The story goes that once there was a woman named Yeshe Dawa, Wisdom Moon. She lived in a time long ago when people believed that in order to be enlightened, one had to have a man's body. So the belief was that you had to have a masculine body, a male body, to be enlightened. Wisdom Moon was so developed in her understanding and compassion, her wisdom, her patience, her concentration, and her generosity, that people came from all over the kingdom to see her counsel. Crowds sat at her gate. And what I'm struck by in the story of Tara is that she was doing something that women did not normally do. She was teaching. And crowds came to see her. And the men in that time were not used to receiving wisdom from a female form. The crowds gathered around her and they told her, Wisdom Moon, you are so close to being enlightened. You must pray to be magically transformed into a man. Wisdom Moon was quiet for a moment. She knew that the monks and the holy men meant well, but that their vision was limited, that the vision of these men were limited. Finally, she addressed them. Nowhere can I find what is male, and nowhere can I find what is female, because in the absolute realm, there is no difference between male and female. But in the relative realm, women in the female form have suffered because of patriarchy. And Wisdom Moon says they are simply forms, no more separate from one another than a wave is from water. But since most Buddhas have chosen to come as a man, I vow for all time, until all suffering is ended, I will become enlightened only in a female body. So this is the vow of Tara. Tara says that she will achieve enlightenment only in the female body. So you can see her as a feminist. In Stoicism, we use maxims. And in Buddhism, the way we connect to Tara is through her mantra, which is a vibration of sound, which is Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu Re So Ha. Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu Re So Ha. So Tara has different forms. She has 21 forms, and in the temple where I teach in Colorado, you see all 21 of her forms. Some forms are wrathful, some forms are gentle, and some are really fierce. And when I was going through a difficult time in my life, where I valued compassion and gentleness and kindness, but I found it really hard to take fierce action that was good for me, because compassion begins with self-compassion. So we are not talking about idiot compassion. I meditated on the fierce form of Tara. It was infinitely reassuring for me to see that in this female body, I could be fierce. And so the fierce forms of Tara, that is fierce, but with a heart of compassion. And I see, when I consider Marcus Aurelius, I think of all the different roles that he played as emperor, as a man who sat by his desk, and the image that I have, a coffee mug with riding on a horse, his hand raised, but a man sitting at his desk and writing. So there are these different roles that we play. One of the things that really drew me to Stoicism from the Buddhist tradition is obviously the present moment awareness. In Buddhism, there is great emphasis on lojong, which is mind training. Marcus Aurelius says, each of us lives only in the present, this fleeting moment of time, and the rest of one's life has either already been lived or lies in an unknowable future. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, says, the past is dead, the future is not yet born. So the only country is the country of the present moment. I was struck by Epictetus, his focus on attention, prosoke, the Greek word, of course, which still, we see signs of that in Athens. And Marcus Aurelius's emphasis that our mind has to be this inner citadel. In Buddhism, as in Stoicism, when we say, may I be free of passion, we don't mean love and friendship and warmth. We mean, may I be free of unhealthy passions, which is craving and addictive craving and jealousy and attachment, which is sticky. So the Dalai Lama, who is Tenzin Gyatso, he's the 14th Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibet. He says to foster inner awareness, introspection, and reasoning are more efficient than prayer and meditation. He says, take your mind and your body as a laboratory. Engage in some thorough research on your own mental functioning and examine the possibility of making some positive changes within yourself. For training the mind in Buddhism, as in Stoicism, we use datas. We say things like present moment, wonderful moment. Happiness is here and now, so that we are not in this constant state of striving and never, never arriving. The sense of I am home, I have arrived. So this picture is when I traveled to Vietnam, where my Zen teacher, and went to his root temple in Vietnam, Hue. And the Dalai Lama says that fundamentally all spiritual traditions, so whether it's philosophy, Buddhism is often seen as a philosophy, perform the same function, which is to help us tame our mental states, overcome our negativities. So the idea in Buddhism, and if you visit one of the museums when they are open post-COVID, in the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, where I live, you'll see these Buddhist statues carrying a jewel. And the jewel is the jewel of our enlightened mind, our beautiful mind. Sri Ravi Shankar in the Hindu tradition says, protect your mind at all costs. We talk in Buddhism of the mind like the sun, which is covered by clouds, the clouds of our own neurosis and our own habitual patterns. And so through practice, through the daily practice of reminding ourselves of our core values, of looking at ourselves at the end of the day, we train our mind, we work with our emotions. So the emphasis is on practicing. And the emphasis is on, as in Stoicism, is that your mind has this infinite potential to be trained. That your human life and your effort is extraordinarily important and useful. Whether we believe in another life or not is immaterial. The fact is we are here now. And we benefit because of the work of people like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, and the work of each other right now. So I was drawn to Buddhism Stoicism through Buddhism because of the way it helped me deal with my own afflictive emotions. I am no enlightened sage. I'm very much in progress, but I have the daily aspiration and I work on it. The Dalai Lama, he says, when we forgive, we take back control of our own fate and our feeling. We become our own liberator. So we are not looking for liberation from a source outside ourselves, but we realize that we ourselves have that potential. He says self-defeating attitudes arise not out of their own accord, but out of ignorance, that other people's unskillful behaviors arise out of ignorance. And that's what Marcus reminds himself of every morning too, right? And he says, do away with the judgment and the notion, I have been harmed. You know, dear Marcus, you know, there are times that I'm struggling with unforgiveness and I open up the meditations and there it is, you know, do away with the judgment and the notion I have been harmed. And as soon as you do away with that notion, it drops. The harm itself is gone. The best way to avenge yourself is not to become as they are, so that we have the power to be who we want to be. We have the power to live the life we want to be. We have the power to have the character we want to be. And this is what is so liberating and empowering in these traditions. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, he says, when the force of circumstances causes you in some sense to lose your equilibrium, return to yourself with all speed, for you will be more in control of the measure if you return to it again and again. So the focus is on practice. Practice. Just as we brush our teeth every day, as we shower. And if we don't do that, we can't say, I brushed my teeth last week and today, you know, I don't have to brush it for the next week. But that our mind and our emotions needs this daily practice, whether it's through mindfulness, whether it's through journaling and reading philosophical texts, but that it's through practice that we get better. In Buddhism, that we say that if you practice anger, you will get better at anger. If you practice compassion and kindness and clear-sightedness, you will get better at that. So the other thing that struck me in both Buddhism and Stoicism is this view on interbeing. When we said the opening intention, the idea was that we are all interconnected. That when we work for ourselves, we work for all sentient beings. That our efforts help not just us, but others. And the view from above meditation is one that I love. And I listen to that recording, which Donald has done very often. It's this idea of getting out of this claustrophobia of your own grief and your own self-interest, but moving beyond that to this larger view, so that even though you may not be free from suffering, it gets diffused. It's put into perspective that all sentient beings suffer. And Thich Nhat Hanh coins the word interbeing. He says when we look at the lack of cooperation in society today, it stems from ignorance. Amma, who's a hugging saint in India, she says that, you know, the top floor is burning. And we sit on the ground floor and we think, oh, that doesn't matter to me. It's only the top floor that's burning, but our house is on fire. So this focus that we are all interconnected is important. So in Buddhism, we have this focus on bodhicitta, aspiration. Mindfulness practice is one tiny, the way it's taught is one tiny understanding of what Buddhism practice of meditation is, because in Buddhism, there is this open space. There is this view from above. There is this extending of our view. So focus on present moment awareness is just one little aspect of meditation practice. Their practices such as metta, loving kindness, it's fine and well to say, forgive others, don't be angry, have loving kindness towards all beings. How do you do that? You do that through training and through practice. So, Marcus, we learn how to deal with anger through all the different strategies. When I'm angry, I tell myself, drop the notion you have been harmed. So I'm using something to work with that anger. So there's practices like metta, which is on the handout that you can download from the website, where you actually train your mind to wish well to all, even those who you perceive may have harmed you. And of course, Marcus Aurelius, who we love, said in the morning of every day, he says, nor can I be angry with my kinsmen nor hate them, for we have come into being for cooperation, which is why fellowship is so important in these traditions. We can't go on it alone. We learn from the hard work and the efforts of each other.
Ranjini, that's 4 minutes, 4 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to skip working. So we work hard. And I want to end with a final meditation. And the final meditation, I just want to bring to mind the story of Hypatia. I know that she's a Neoplatonist, but her story really struck me because among all the philosophers, Hypatia was the one who had this most gory and brutal death. That, here was this woman who taught philosophy, and she did it alone. In a world, and this is taken from Edward J. Watts, in a world before feminism, she did it alone. She was not trying to advance the movement or to create opportunities. She pushed past the limits of what other female philosophers had done. So I want to Hypatia, for those of you who don't know, had this terrible death where she was probably dragged from her carriage, and her skin was torn and wounded with these pottery shards or ceramic tiles. Her eyes were gouged out. She was stripped naked. And so for me as a woman, to imagine this woman dressed in coarse white robes, a philosopher devoted to wisdom, hounded by this faceless mob, and not just killed and strangled, but actually violated, was something that resonated really profoundly with me because it spoke of Hypatia's courage. So I'm just going to end with a short meditation of a minute. So just bringing to mind, feeling your feet on the floor, coming home to your breath, and asking yourself, what kind of life do you want to live? Bringing to mind the courage of a woman philosopher like Hypatia, who at a time of fundamentalism and political rivalry was brutally murdered. So just connecting to your own courage. All of us here, whether this is our first visit, we have come to philosophy because there is something in us that loves philosophy. And when we lack courage, bring to mind philosophers like Hypatia, who had the courage to teach and speak and walk their path. So thank you.